Scandal revisited, or maybe not so much. Hey, how are you, folks? Jason Horowitz, glad to be with you on Parrish's Three-Pointers each and every week. We hear the voice behind the words of our college basketball columnist, Gary Parrish, and let's bring him in right now. Gary, how's it going, man?
Everything's good. What's up, Jason?
Not too much. It's going fantastic. Let's get into this right away. This week, they had a vote again on a ban on text messages. It was already banned. They re-voted. Why'd they do it this week?
Because there was at least a seeming opinion out there that this is something that needed to be addressed again, but it sort of went with a whimper. Nobody really fought for it, and so the ban will stay in place. And you know, I've been consistent on this. I've always thought the ban was a complete overreaction. It's not, text messaging recruit is not intrusive like some say. It's not expensive like some say. You can get an unlimited text message plan for $20 a month, and I'm not trying to discount the value of $20. That can be a lot of money for some people, but if $20 is the make-you-break-you line in terms of how you live, then you probably can't afford a cell phone in the first place, and then it's all a moot point. So at the end of the day, I don't really care about the ban one way or another. It's not going to affect my life. I don't recruit players, but I just find the whole thing foolish and a complete overreaction by a group of people who probably just are terrified of technology in some form.
Well, but Gary, a lot of people can put a face to this in the fact that Kelvin Sampson, he's a guy that has been talked about for more than 600 text messages as far as violations. He says he doesn't know about it. His assistant coach took the fall for him. Maybe this is a couple months ago, but certainly can be labeled as a cheater. Isn't that the reason maybe that this is in place?
Well, one of the things when they tried to say Kelvin can't call recruits anymore, he could still text message recruits, and he would just text message them and say, hey, call me.
But
and when the recruit called him, he'd answer the phone.
Gary? Isn't that just a way around it?
Of course it was a way around it. And so the natural thing people bring up is, is it fair that Kelvin's still employed while his assistant coach, had to take a fall? I don't know, but college basketball isn't a business that deals in fairness too often. We always talk about graduation rates and rules violations, but that stuff only gets a coach fired if the school wants to fire the coach. People don't mind coaches who make illegal phone calls and don't graduate players nearly as much as they mind losers who make illegal phone calls and don't graduate players. And regardless of what you think about Kelvin Sampson, the guy's not a loser. He's got a top 10 team in the country.
Yeah, he certainly does, and Indiana one of those. All right, let's go to winners. Indiana may be a 1 seed if they continue to win and some of the teams at the top fall off as we move forward here, but that's not the case right now. Is it easy to say the top 4 seeds going forward?
I think so. I mean, I'm not a historian, but I don't really remember a year where there seemed to be this much separation between the top 4 and everybody else. Those 4 teams, North Carolina, Kansas, Memphis, and UCLA, are combined 64-1, which is insane. So if you're asking, I think those 4 teams are going to be the 4 number 1 teams, but I also think it would be silly to think they're unapproachable. I suspect Indiana, Duke, Georgetown, and a few others will be there at the end too. So it's going to be fun to see how this plays out, and even more so to see if this holds up, if those top 4 can remain at the top.
And it certainly will be interesting to see who wins conference play when we get through to March, because that always has a big deal as far as number 1 seeds as well. All right, let's move forward a little bit. Vanderbilt last week lost to Kentucky, first loss of the season. They play Tennessee on Thursday night. But there's another team, Gary, that you think maybe up there a little bit, a little undeservingly so. Who is it?
Well, I think Texas A&M, and I don't know that they're not as good as their ranking, but the body of work is just not there. Their best wins over Ohio State, which has already lost 5 times. Their 1 losses to Arizona, which has already lost 5 times. They haven't played an opponent that appears in this week's AP poll, so there's reason to be skeptical, I think. Now, though, let me be clear. I like the team. DeAndre Jordan and Joseph Jones are fabulous, but there's a whole lot of nothing on the resume right now, which is why Saturday's game against Kansas State should be a nice measuring stick and something to pay attention. You want to see if they can go out and beat a legitimate team like that.
But, Gary, is it really their fault, though, when you look at their schedule, that Alabama's not as good this year, that LSU's not as good this year? You talked about Ohio State, and they also played Washington. I mean, they played Arizona, too. They've played teams with big-name recognition. It's not really their fault that those teams aren't as good this year.
No, not at all. I mean, you make these schedules in advance. When you schedule Alabama, you don't know Ronald Steele is not going to be available. When you schedule Ohio State, or you play in the same event where you're probably going to meet Ohio State, you don't know. You probably know Oden's not going to be there, but you think Mike Conley will be. So, no, this is just sort of a weird situation for a BCS-affiliated school that's as good as they are to go this long, this deep into the season without playing what would be called marquee opponents. So, no, it's a little bit just by chance, but it doesn't change the fact that on paper right now their resume doesn't add up to some of the other teams in the top 10.
All right, but they are number 10 in the nation. Real quickly, Gary, let's have your rant for the week.
With a 70-54 loss at Clemson Tuesday night, NC State dropped to 11-5 overall, 0-2 in the ACC, and it now appears the Wolfpack are headed to their 2nd straight NIT. So I ask, What was so wrong with Herb Sendek again? Look, I'm not trying to pick on NC State, but what's happening now is what usually happens to schools with a warped sense of what they should be. Sendek took NC State to 5 consecutive NCAA tournaments, but that wasn't good enough, so he was run out of town. And now Sidney Lowe would kill to lose in the second round, while Sendek has Arizona State in the top 25. So the lesson is simple, I think. Be careful what you wish for, fans, because what you might find out in the long run is that it's better to be boring while winning than dynamic while losing.
And for more on Arizona State, be sure to check out In the Paint from January 14th, where we talked about Herb Sendek and Sparky and a trip this week to Northern California. Gary Parrish, thank you very much, sir. We will talk to you next week.
Looking forward to it.
And, folks, for more from Gary Parrish, of course, be sure to read all of his articles on CBSSports.com. And, of course, check this out each and every week on your website on Wednesday. For Gary Parrish, I'm Jason Horowitz. Take care.